Hi everyone, thank you for taking the time to watch my video. My name is Ariel Buenteo, and I'm going to be arguing the stance that the Trump administration did not effectively respond to the threat of coronavirus and address the global pandemic as a national security concern. So a big part of Trump administration's poor response to coronavirus happened long before it ever erupted. By making massive budget cuts to medical research organizations and ending programs that could help pandemic preparedness. And so this made the United States more vulnerable to the threat of disease because we didn't have the necessary personnel and structure in place to handle this kind of threat. And so here's some examples of this. In February 2018, Trump signs bill that cuts $1.35 billion in funding for the prevention and public health at the CDC. May 2018, Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, removes Timothy Zimmer from the National Security Council and dismantles Zimmer's unit that was dedicated to global health security and biodefense, and then never replaces it. And in September 2018, so this all happened within the same year, these three instances, February, May, and now September 2018, Trump administration diverts $9.8 million in funding designated for FEMA and reallocates it to ICE. And Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar diverts $266 million in funding from the CDC to detention camps for immigrant children. And so with this example specifically, I'm not even sure where the money went because there's been numerous reports about the heinous and inhumane living conditions in these detention camps, where we have people packed into a cage, with or without cots to sleep on. I'm not too sure. Going without meals and basic sanitary necessities like soap and toothpaste, communal toilets and that sort of thing. So I'm not even sure where this $266 million went. September 2019, the Trump administration ends a U.S. program called PREDICT, which was, specifically a program that trained public health experts in other countries to discover and intervene in deadly outbreaks. And the list goes on from there. But another part of Trump administration's horrible response was the numerous warnings that were ignored, the downplaying of the threat of coronavirus in the media by the Trump administration, and the false promises and outright lies that were spewed in the media by President Trump himself. So just a few warnings. Bill Gates years ago stressed the need for national security emphasis dedicated to global pandemics. The intelligence community, once we got closer to when coronavirus erupted, attempted to signal the seriousness of the threat as it was developing in China to President Trump. And the director of the CDC warned the National Security Council of the threat as well. And Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, attempts to warn President Trump personally multiple times, but Trump just calls him an alarmist, is more focused on, this one occasion, he's more focused on vaping. Economic concerns regarding vaping in the United States. So, and not only that, once he did start to address the media regarding coronavirus, he would make false promises, saying that there was going to be enough masks for everybody, enough tests for everybody, and, that just was not the case and is not the case. And he would report in the media anyway that U.S. numbers were going down, that anybody who wants a test can get one, and that in his opinion, he actually took action quite early. And these are just outright lies that really just attempt to make himself look good. And even as coronavirus cases increased, it seems that Trump spent more time golfing and attending rallies for his re-election campaign than he spent trying to address the pandemic, which is very sad because in times like, in global crises such as like a pandemic, we need that leadership, and he wasn't there. So Trump was briefed as early as January 3rd, but failed to take any action until 2 months later, and some of the actions were quite pointless. One example of this was the travel suspension from incoming travelers from China to the United States. There were several provisions, in the ban that contained exemptions, and so those exemptions still allowed for thousands of travelers to enter the United States. So it's kind of like, what was the point of having a ban at all if we're still allowing thousands of people to come in, especially when the virus spreads so rapidly, so easily, and people can even be asymptomatic and carry it around with them and not know. So essentially, Trump didn't take the threat seriously until the pandemic started to affect his economic interests, like the stock market. So some of the effects of this was, hospital and healthcare workers didn't receive the supplies and equipment and protective gear that they needed to treat patients and protect themselves at the same time. This is very sad because these are the people who are on the front lines fighting the disease, and the Trump administration didn't take care of them the way that they should. And and for the general public, we didn't have adequate access to masks, testing, medical care, and financial assistance. There was legislation, the CARES Act, that was intended to provide relief and financial aid to the general public, but when it was finally enacted, it wasn't nearly enough to help people stay afloat, and many people still haven't received their stimulus checks or their tax returns or receive unemployment. So a lot of the policies in the CARES Act have yet to still be implemented. And as an added bonus, some Senate members took advantage of the situation and hid provisions in the CARES Act because it was an 880-page bill. So they were able to sneak some stuff in there because I don't know about you, but not the average person is going to read 880 pages of legislative language. So some of these provisions actually benefited wealthy companies and contributed to programs that had nothing to do with coronavirus. Take, for example, there's a provision buried deep on page 203 that details a tax break for real estate developers and hedge fund managers. And then the Joint Committee on Taxations estimate that this tax break will give away $135 billion over the next 10 years to those people, and 80% of those people earning more than $1 million in income. So, those people, they don't need that money. Small businesses need it, the homeless need it, healthcare systems need it. It's just ridiculous. Not only are the people who need it most unable to access their relief, but there are people in our government exploiting a national crisis for their own benefit and for the benefit of their rich friends. So it's pretty messed up. And going back to how the CARES Act and stimulus checks specifically wasn't nearly enough to help people stay afloat when people were losing their jobs and, unable to work. In many states like California, New York, and Hawaii, $12,000 isn't enough to cover rent. And so the overwhelming majority of people who were most impacted by coronavirus were the people in low-income communities and people of color, especially because we make up the service industry and the essential workforce, and we cannot afford to stay home like the rich can. And so we risk exposure every day when we go to work. And even despite this, even despite knowing this and that people are at risk by being at work, state officials, like in my home state, Texas, actually started to implement reopening procedures, way too early because of their own economic interest and not in the interest of keeping people safe. So the Trump administration and local governments have made it perfectly clear, that, money just matters more than the people of the United States. And it's very sad. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video, and let me know what you think. Thank you.